Louis Hagemann was known everywhere in the Dutch underworld by one name: Long Louis. He got the nickname because of his unusual height and his long, thin body. People said he looked calm, but there was something cold in his eyes that made strangers avoid him. Louis was not loud, not dramatic, but his silence was more frightening than most men's shouting. He grew up in a rough neighborhood in The Hague, surrounded by men who drank too much and fought for no reason. Louis learned very early that the world respected force, not kindness. He was tall, quiet, and angry, and he used that anger to survive the streets. Instead of attending classes, Louis spent his days watching older boys steal, fight, and intimidate shopkeepers. He copied everything. By age 14, he could threaten grown men without blinking. People said he never smiled, even as a child. Louis joined small street gangs and started committing robberies. He wasn't the smartest among them, but he was the one who never hesitated. When the others were scared, Louis stepped forward. The Dutch Hells Angels always watched for fearless teenagers. Louis was perfect for them. Tall, quiet, loyal, and violent when needed. They approached him long before he turned 20. Louis started by doing small tasks for club members, cleaning motorcycles, delivering packages, standing outside bars to watch for trouble. But he never complained. He was learning the lifestyle. One night a fight broke out in a bar controlled by the Hells Angels. Louis, although still young, stepped in, knocking out 2 men with shocking force. That was the night the Angels began taking him seriously. He moved from being a simple helper to being a real part of the group. Louis finally felt he belonged somewhere. The club gave him identity, respect, and a sense of power. The Hells Angels followed strict rules: loyalty, silence, violence when necessary, and absolute obedience. Louis followed these rules more strictly than anyone, which made him rise fast. When tasks were dangerous or dirty, Louis was the one they called. He didn't talk much, but he completed every assignment without complaint. This made him valuable and feared. By now, everyone in the underworld had heard of Long Louis. They said he never smiled, never hesitated, and never asked questions. If the club needed something done, Louis would do it. After years of proving himself, Louis finally became a full-patch Hells Angel. This was one of the proudest moments of his life. He wore the patch like a second skin. The club soon realized that Louis was not just loyal, he was deadly. He could take a life without shaking. This made him the perfect hitman. And in the Dutch underworld, hitmen were rare and extremely valuable. Louis did not shout or boast. He spoke little and observed everything. He remembered faces, routes, habits. His calmness made him terrifying. He enforced debts, punished traitors, threatened rivals, and executed targets. The Angels trusted him because he never miscalculated. As the Dutch drug economy grew, violence became more common. The Angels needed men who could keep their power intact. Louis became essential. Criminals whispered his name in fear. If you heard Long Louis is coming, you either paid your debt or disappeared. Louis had no known close friends. People said he loved no one and trusted no one. Even inside the club, he was a mystery. He carried out hits with extreme precision. Many of his jobs were never solved. Some bodies were never found. Louis always worked alone. Dutch investigators started linking Louis to violent crimes, but proving anything was difficult. Witnesses were either too scared or no longer alive. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Louis became connected to a double murder: Carina Bolhar and Henny Ates. Their deaths would follow him for decades. Carina had been romantically involved with Louis. Their relationship was intense, chaotic, and dangerous. Carina eventually left him, and that decision may have sealed her fate. Carina and her friend were found brutally murdered. The scene was violent and personal. The police immediately suspected Louis because of Carina's connection to him. Louis insisted he had nothing to do with it, but many people believed he killed Karina out of rage and killed Henny because she was a witness. Lack of evidence made it difficult to prosecute. The crime remained unsolved for years, even though Lewis remained the prime suspect. Lewis resumed his life with the Hells Angels, acting as the club's silent enforcer. Nothing seemed to affect him. He became involved in drug deals, extortion, smuggling operations, and violent disputes. Many criminals met their end through him. The club shielded Lewis from police attention. Witnesses were too scared to speak. The code of silence was strong. Even though years passed, detectives kept digging into the Karina case. They believed Lewis would eventually slip. The Dutch underworld grew more chaotic. New gangs, new money, new turf wars. Through all of this, Lewis stayed relevant. Even as he grew older, he remained dangerous. Young criminals looked at him with both respect and fear. After many years, new information began to appear about the double murder witnesses who were once silent started talking. The Karina case reopened. Lewis found himself back in the spotlight. Detectives gathered enough evidence to finally arrest him. They believed they could now prove what he had done decades earlier. Police took him into custody. The underworld was shocked. They thought he was untouchable. The trial was emotional. Karina's family attended every hearing. Witnesses described Lewis's violent nature. Throughout the trial, Lewis barely reacted. He stared ahead, silent as always. Protected witnesses gave statements. Some described hearing Lewis confess. Others described threats and violence. Even without physical proof, the testimonies were powerful. The court believed the stories. Decades after the murders, Lewis was finally found guilty. Justice had moved slowly, but it had caught up with him. Lewis received a heavy sentence. The courtroom was silent as the judge spoke. Karina's family wept. Many criminals feared that more old cases would reopen. Lewis's conviction sent shockwaves through biker circles. Lewis adapted to prison life quickly. He kept to himself, watched everything quietly, and spoke very little, just like outside. The Hells Angels began separating from him. Public relations mattered. Lewis had become a liability. Even behind bars, people talked about him. He was still Long Lewis, the silent hitman with a deadly past. Documentaries and articles appeared about his life. People wanted to understand how one man could live with so much violence. Some ex-members revealed stories of Lewis's brutal assignments. They claimed he was involved in more killings than anyone knew. Experts said Lewis lacked empathy and fear. They described him as emotionally detached, capable of extreme violence without remorse. To outsiders, he seemed quiet. To criminals, he was a nightmare. He lived between two worlds and belonged fully to neither. Lewis's greatest weapon was silence. He never bragged, never confessed, never asked for forgiveness. Karina's family carried their grief for decades. They said the hardest part was not knowing the truth for so long. Lewis left behind a legacy filled with fear. His name was forever connected to the darkest side of the Dutch biker world. Young criminals often studied his life, but many said his path was a dead end. Powerful for a moment, destroyed in the end. Lewis had no loyal friends, no close family, no people visiting him in prison. Violence had isolated him completely. The Hells Angels moved on. Lewis became just a chapter in their long history. As he aged, Lewis became weaker, but his eyes stayed cold. The same eyes that terrified the underworld investigators think Lewis knew secrets about many unsolved crimes. But he never talked. Lewis chose violence, chose silence, chose loyalty to a club instead of building a normal life. People still tell stories about him. Some true, some exaggerated, but all of them dark. Louis Hagemann's story shows that the underworld may promise power, respect, and brotherhood. But in the end, it gives nothing. Lewis ended his life in a cold prison cell, surrounded by silence, carrying the weight of crimes that destroyed countless lives.